Good afternoon, Eric. Thanks for coming along to talk to us. I'd like to know first and foremost a bit of background. Where was you born, and which school did you go to, and why have you got into local politics?
Well, if you want to go back that far, Milton, I was born at my grandmother's home in Swinbank Avenue, and that one in Gawthorpe, which is actually at the time was in Dewsbury constituency, but is now in Ossick, Wakefield. And I had a draw for a cot, like lots of other working class families at that time. I went to my local school, Carlton Road, infant school in Dewsbury, no longer there, unfortunately, pulled down. Then I went to Dewsbury Technical School, which is now Westborough High School. Although I'm widely travelled, I've never been too far from home.
Well, they say the apple never falls too far from the tree, don't they?
Well, that's what they say.
So, what got you into politics, and what was your interest? When did it start to happen?
You'll be far too young to remember a newspaper called the Daily Herald, which was a Labour newspaper. I was brought up on that, and my job, we used to save all the papers, including the Sunday papers, and my job on a Sunday morning was cut the papers up into squares, put it on a string, and we had an outside toilet. We didn't have a bathroom, we had an outside toilet. And I used to read the Daily Herald when I was a child, and that got me really interested in politics and about inequalities. Yeah, so that's all about inequalities in life, and that actually shaped what I've become. All being well, a Labour politician, and a pretty good Labour politician, I'd like to think.
So when did you actually join the Labour Party?
I joined the Labour Party, if you like, pretty late. I think I was in late 20s, but I've been a trade union member since I started work, and I've always been active in the trade union movement and been asked on many occasions to stand for office, and I always declined because I liked what I was doing. I was a shop steward, convener, and I liked that direct contact, not only with the people I work with, but the employers, and I like standing up to employers who used to treat, if you weren't careful, you used to treat people like dirt, and I didn't like that.
Okay. So where are you now in terms of your political career?
Well, I've been a councillor since 1994. I had a gap year when I lost my seat, quite surprisingly, to a member of the British National Party, and that was a shock, I must admit. And I think if I'd have lost my seat to anyone else, maybe, just maybe, I would have called it a draw and walked away from my political career.
What is the role of the councillor then, and how long have you said you've been in Dewsbury?
Except for I'll call it my gap year.
Oh, your gap year, okay.
Yes.
You're a councillor?
Since 94, so that'll make it nearly 20 years.
And which particular ward?
Dewsbury East.
Dewsbury East. How do you find Dewsbury East?
Dewsbury East is a good part of the world, though there are lots of different parts to Dewsbury East. It's like some people almost have a village mentality, and I think you can compare that anywhere you like, particularly in Kirklees, or perhaps anywhere.
So give us a brief overview, please, of your role as a councillor.
Well, council, I suppose, is all things to all men, it depending on what they want, or what your constituent wants. But my role is father confessor to some people. I'm the man that makes things happen to other people. I like to think of myself to think about in advance about the strategy that we as a party, or we as a community, and we as a local authority go down, because you have to have that strategic idea involving regeneration, community aspiration, planning, building, you name it. We're multifaceted. And of course, I'm deputy chair of the ITA at the moment, which covers transport for up to 5 authorities.
Now we know that Dewsbury is a wonderful place if you live in Dewsbury, but outside of Dewsbury there seems to be a perception and that it's dark, gloomy, miserable, high unemployment, no enterprise.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense. Dewsbury wonderful.
But you understand where I'm coming from?
I know exactly where you come from. The media doesn't do any favours. It's just the same as anywhere else. We all have our bad apples, but Dewsbury is a good place to live, good place to work. We've got excellent manufacturing base, educational standards are going up. If you look at the town centre with lots and lots of things happening, demographics have changed about the people who actually live and work in our town, but all in all, there's a lot worse places to live than Dewsbury.
Mm-hmm. I've spent quite a number of months in Dewsbury over the last year, and I must say it's not what I heard it was, or not even what you hear things, then you make up your own minds because you don't know, but when you really experience it, a lot of good people are there working extremely hard. However, there's still this perception that the Muslims and the Christians or non-Christians or Muslims, they don't get on. There's a real antagonism between the two, especially on Beckett and Pilgrim. What's your view on that?
That's absolute. Well, I can't say absolute nonsense because there's always going to be people that dislike people from A, because they're seen as immigrants, B, they're different religion and they're dressed differently. But as you refer to Dewsbury Moor and Beckett's, can I just take you back it's quite some time now when that little girl disappeared from Dewsbury Moor. That whole community, regardless of race, regardless of income, just came together and united and looked for that little girl day and night, and they were there for that. The media does not do Dewsbury any favours. Any isolated incident in our town, and the pour in. Why, I do not know. I just wish to go away and leave us alone, and our town and the people that live in our town will be far better for it.
Could you please tell me about the plans for Northgate, please?
Well, as you're aware, I'm sure you're aware, the co-op buildings were been through the process of what's the phrase now? Compulsory purchase. It did take quite a long time. The shell has been actually made watertight, all new windows, new roof, and before very long, because we've got Heritage Lottery grant, I believe. Part of it is.
How much was that Heritage Lottery?
That was about £2 million to refurbish it entirely. I think we've already got tenants lined up, so that in itself will breathe new life into the town. Lots of footfall. There is a shop scheme, a shop front scheme. That we're working on. My colleague Paul Kane chairs the Regeneration team in Dewsbury, which I'm part of, and hopefully in the not too distant future all the shops at the other side from the co-op buildings will all have new shop fronts with the same kind of livery, so which will give the whole shop fronts, the whole area, a complete lift. And hopefully we'll encourage entrepreneurs to come into these empty shops. There's 2 or 3 on that side. Hopefully we can bring people on the ground floor of the former cooperative building and give that a lift.
And what is the overall objective, and are you optimistic that you can deliver?
I'm always optimistic. Of course it is. Dewsbury has been, as I said earlier, like a lot of small towns, at a pretty low ebb. But we're working on. We can do only so much with a limited budget. We don't own everything, unfortunately. We don't own the core building now. If we did, I think perhaps we could do things differently. We don't. So all we can do is actually encourage the many of these absent landlords to take up our offer, work with us, and we encourage them to give their properties a lift, which will in turn give the town a lift, which will, as I said earlier, accelerate the employment and then the footfall, and then more employment and more footfall, and then because it's spiral, so instead of going down, we start going back up.
I think I had the figure of approximately £129 million.
129. That's the cuts we're facing, and year on year.
Year on year on year.
Mm.
What impact will that be to these schemes?
The money is there for them, fortunately. I dread to think if these, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, maybe they wouldn't happen. But we still need to find, even though we've in our massively reduced budget, we still need to find a little bit of our budget which will, it's almost like spent to save or spent to encourage business to come in. There's still got to be a line in there somewhere, even though our capital budget and our revenue budget will be massively reduced, because obviously if you borrow money, you have to pay, and your interest rates go a long time, so we have reduced our capital budget, so our outgoings are less. Recently they announced as a government measure, they were thinking about, because I don't think it will happen, we will cut benefits off completely for people under 25. They're thinking about it.
Wow.
Yeah, but what they forget is a lot of people under 25 are one parent and sometimes 2 parent, single families. They've got 2 children. Cut benefits for them, what they want to do.
You said a number of things about the cuts, but you had actually said to me the impact that this £129 million is going to have on youth. You've talked about the elderly. You've even touched on unemployment to some degree. But how will the youth survive from 16 perhaps to 24?
If I had a magic wand, Milton, I'll tell you. Obviously, this is going to have consequences for everyone, including the needs. But fortunately, we, under the leadership of Mahbub and our cabinet, I think it's a fact anyway. I know it's a fact, though I don't know the numbers, to be quite honest. But we have more apprenticeships in Kirklees than any of the other local authorities. The educational standards are soaring in Kirklees. Because we have a really good education department and some really good cabinet members in charge of education, and further down the line obviously some wonderful head teachers and teachers. So standards are rising a lot faster than our neighbours, which will all be will give our young children the opportunity to get employment. It's not going to be easy, but it will become easy. Recessions come, recessions go. This has been thanks to no thanks to the government policies that Mr Osborne has inflicted upon us all. Austerity is fine to a degree, but I think he's gone too far, which has slowed down the recovery. And the first thing they cut was building schools for the future, which would have given us lots and lots of new schools all over the country and stimulated the economy, getting lots of people back into work. They took us back into recession instead of continuing with that, which any fool knows that would have brought us out of recession. But perhaps this generation of youngsters will miss out. But hopefully the next generation will be in full employment. I do hope so, but you must remember that I think it's next year that children have to stay at school until they're 18. And so they either have to be in some form of training or education. So that will take quite a number of people out of this needs situation.
Are you concerned that it might take you back before you can come forwards again?
There's always that possibility, but don't forget, as local councillors, we work with, say for instance, Kirklees College. The first thing that Peter, the new head of the college, did when he came into post, he asked to meet us, and obviously we did. We encouraged him to bring back the building side of the college, which he did. Because at one time in Dewsbury with a thriving building section in that college. He's reintroduced it, and the demand is enormous. You know, so if people, as you describe, that perhaps they're not really academic, but don't forget that bricklayers still have to measure.
Absolutely.
But they can be trained. It's a skilled job, and people actually, some youngsters like working with their hands, and then they pick up the maths, if you like, with working with things like that. So there are opportunities out there, but the only thing that I worry about is people being left behind with no qualifications if they don't want something like that, because other people that are better qualified, if they've no jobs on theirs, they'll look and they will take anything. And so if you've got an articulate, intelligent young man or woman, and sometimes they're overqualified for the job, but they'll take it. So those people that aren't, they then perhaps miss out. So
Could you tell us about the Integrated Transport Authority?
well, the message in the tin, it's all about integrating transport in the 5 districts in West Yorkshire: Bradford, Calderdale, Leeds, Wakefield, and of course Kirklees. At the moment, we have just, well, it might sound silly, but we've voted ourselves out of office because we have the levying authority as well, to become part of, in the 1st of April next year, the combined authority, which will have a completely different role. There's 2 things on the buses. The operators want a partnership model. We want to call it a contracts model. That means we can actually control routes and set fares. There's a risk factor, and we can actually limit the margins. In that way we can control fares, and the customers that use public transport can hopefully get a better deal, and then we can organise the network. But then there are the rail side of things as well, and we're looking with other local authorities, 30 in all, there's a possibility that we can franchise Northern Rail.
But what is the reason for all of this? I didn't hear the word efficiency. Is that what it is?
It's all about efficiency. It's all about efficiency.
It's all about efficiency.
It's all about investment.
It's not about efficiency, it's about investment.
Both.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What we want is an electrified system for Northern Rail,
Okay.
to run smoother, quicker, a lot more efficient, a lot less expensive to run. New trains, because under the system at the moment, the cascade, new trains might go in Bristol, then the old trains go somewhere else, and we finish up with the old things that still run, they still get you from A to B, but they're clapped out basically. So we want, not only do we want newer trains, we want more of them. We want a better experience for the passenger that uses them. We want a better timetable. In fact, we want a better transport system, full stop. And by franchise, if we take over the franchise, local authorities, there are risks, but we think we can do it better. And everyone gets a better deal out of it. So we get better stations, better trains, a better travelling experience for the public.
And will the fares go down?
They may not go down, but they certainly won't go up as quickly.
Okay. Your colleagues, Paul and Kathy, how do they support you in all of this?
We support one another, a quite good team, an effective team. Paul got elected a year after I did. Funnily enough, and he didn't. We had a candidate in place. Well, funnily enough, being unemployed for quite some time. Jed, do you want me to mention him? Well, Jed Ashton, who was a council employee. He'd been out for had to work for quite some time. And persuaded him to stand for the local authority. Then he got a job with the local authority. So that was a problem then. Does he stand as a councillor or become employed? Quite rightly, he became employed by the council. I would have done exactly the same in his place. So then we had to find a candidate in a hurry. We got Paul Kane, and it's the rest. He booked his holiday at Paul, and funny enough, when on the day of his election, he wasn't there. He wasn't here. He's on holiday. So it was a funny situation of that I had to make his acceptance speech when he became elected, and then subsequently Kathy came along. Kathy's been a member now 6 years, and she's a cabinet member. Paul's chair of planning, and she does very well. But we're quite an effective team.
Final message to your constituents in Dewsbury East, and perhaps even to the wider Kirklees, with regards to what's going to happen in the next few years in your role as a councillor. How could you breathe some optimism into us?
That is not easy. That final message is not easy, as you mentioned earlier. We're facing 129 million cuts year on year, and perhaps some more to come. even though we are slowly coming out of recession. The council will have to be reshaped. Lots of services, well, we won't be able to deliver those services. As simple as that. How can you? You know, with a massive cut like that, a 40% cut in government grant, impossible. A lot of people think that they pay the council tax and that pays for everything.
Yeah.
I only wish it did. That equates to roughly 17-18% of our budget.
Right.
You know, even though you pay, I know you live in a big house and you pay band CRD and you pay a couple of £1,000 a year. You know, oh sorry, band D. But it doesn't. It only pays for a lot of it. Collectively, it's a lot of money, but it doesn't pay for everything. So we depend heavily on government grant, and it's being taken away. So things are going to get grim before they get better. But get better they will. But by working together, that's the only way. We've got to face up to that, face a challenge, and just get on with it. You know, and it's as simple as that.
In the main, are all the parties kind of getting on about this, or what you see in Whitehall is that a kind of view of what goes on in the local chambers here?
Yes, it's adversarial. Yeah, that's right. But even more so, I think. But there has to be some realism. Because you can shout I can shout at you and you can shout at me all day, but if you've only X amount of pounds to spend, you can only spend it once. So perhaps it's time for people to, well, maybe it's time for heads to be knocked together, and some realism get in there somehow. How we do it, I don't know, because that's the system that at the times we're living. There's got to be, there's always a future. The clock, as I said earlier, the clock turns, the wheel turns, and things will get better. Sure as eggs, but this time it's taking a lot longer than it should do. You know, and unfortunately the people at the bottom of the pile, who I equate myself with, and the people I represent, always seem to come off worse, unfortunately.
Eric, you know, when you was the mayor, I saw you all over the place. You're well loved, particularly in the African descent community. Everybody still talks about you at the time. You've been, I see at Bracknell community centres. You really are a grassroots councillor, and you're well respected, not just in Dewsbury, in Huddersfield. And thank you so much for taking time out in your busy schedule to speak to us. God bless you in your endeavours.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. So thank you, Milton.
Nice.
Thank you.